The airline tickets cost $860 each, my daughter said. If you can't pay, stay behind. Then I saw the fees. My daughter always knew how to bend me with words. But that morning when she pronounced those sentences coldly, something inside me cracked. I thought I had raised an independent, loving, fair woman. Instead, I found myself plunged into a whirlwind of painful discoveries. Silent betrayals, family manipulations, and an emotional system that held me captive, even without screams. Life forced me to choose between unconditional love and dignity. And for the first time I chose myself. Today I turned this journey into strength, into reconstruction, and finally into freedom. I'm happy to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment the city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story can echo. It all started discreetly. A notification on my cell phone, in the middle of the afternoon, interrupted my work with a slight sound. It was from the bank. I thought it was just another one of those notices about invoices or app updates. But when I opened it, the message said, "Approved purchase. $2,580, Airline." My eyes fixed on the screen. I hadn't made any purchase. The charge had occurred at 3:30 in the morning. I thought of a scam, someone hacked my card. The sensation of invasion caused a chill down my spine. I ran to the bank's website. I logged into the account, looked at the full statement. The purchase was there, processed and confirmed. My card number. The same one I keep in the drawer next to the bed. I felt my breath fail for a moment. I clicked on the transaction. It was for 3 airline tickets, economy class, destination Cancun, a place I had never been to and had no intention of visiting. 3 tickets issued in my name, or so I thought. Because when I opened the digital receipt, the final blow came. But the name on the ticket was Emma's. The doubt turned into a headache. I went to my email to look for confirmations, emails from the bank, fraud alerts. I typed the password. Incorrect. I tried again. Incorrect. I started to shake. I clicked on Forgot Password and followed the steps. The system asked to send the code to a secondary email I had never seen. It was similar to my daughter's with a variation. That couldn't be a coincidence. At that same moment I knew. It hadn't been a stranger. It was someone much closer. I tried to remember if at any moment I shared passwords or left papers in plain sight. But that account was mine alone. Professional, protected, with 2-factor authentication. Or at least it should have been. The fact that someone had access meant there was planning. And that scared me even more. After a few attempts, I recovered access via SMS and found the receipts. 3 names. Emma, Bradley, and Miles. All confirmed. And all paid for with my card. The trip was scheduled for the following week. My own email was now someone else's property. I called Emma. She answered on the second ring with a calm and distant voice. I told her about the charge. I asked if she knew anything. She replied with a naturalness that froze me. "What? You always said you wanted us to travel together." I just sped things up. My heart raced. I never said that. I never promised to pay for an international trip for her, her father, and her husband. And even if I had said it, that didn't justify invading my accounts. That was something else. That was betrayal. I hung up the phone and stood still for minutes, staring at the void. I felt that something essential broke there. An invisible link between mother and daughter, which until then I believed to be intact. I began to question everything. My memory, my actions, my judgment. I tried to rationalize, to seek some innocent explanation, but nothing justified what I saw. The evidence was there. And the coldness with which she answered me hurt more than the fraud itself. It was the absence of guilt, of affection, of humanity. It was just the beginning. And I already felt I had lost everything. I didn't sleep that night. I waited for dawn with my eyes open, reviewing every memory. As soon as the day cleared, I went straight to the computer. I decided to look at all my statements from the last 6 months. Lines and more lines of small amounts began to jump off the screen. Purchases in stores I never visited. Subscriptions to unknown apps. Snacks at times when I was sleeping. At first they seemed insignificant, but together they formed a pattern. She had been testing the limits. And I didn't notice. Every transaction was a stab. $12, $27, $33. Small amounts, always on random dates. They never drew attention alone. But grouped together they told a story. A story of silence, of growing boldness. I felt nausea. It wasn't an impulse, it wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. A careful rehearsal. She knew what she was doing. And the worst part, maybe she had done it before. I started reviewing even old cards, canceled accounts. The idea that this behavior was old made me ashamed for never having noticed. How many tests did she run before stealing for real? I tried to call someone who would listen to me without judgment. Tiffany was the first who came to mind. When she answered, her soft voice gave me a sense of refuge. I told her everything. She stayed silent for a while and then asked, "Did you see what Emma posted in the family group yesterday?" I said no. Tiffany then told me, "Emma published a photo saying the trip would be in honor of our family, and that I had given it as a gift." I was floored. She had already told the lie. Publicly. And I once again was the last to know. That made me realize that the story was being written by someone else, and I was just a supporting character in her plot. The most perverse part was that everyone believed it. No one suspected. No one called me to confirm. The image of the generous mother, the sponsor of joy, was already circulating on the family's cell phones. Meanwhile, I was trying to understand how my life was invaded in this way. The lie had already been told. Several times, Emma arrived home with the same expression as always, as if nothing had happened. I tried to keep calm. I showed the statements, the messages, the records. She showed no surprise, nor fear. She just crossed her arms and said, "It's just money, Mom. Are you going to die with it saved up?" My vision darkened for an instant. It was more than disrespect. It was contempt. She wasn't an inconsequential teenager. She was an adult woman married with a job. But she acted as if I were a machine to provide money. That destroyed me. The tone of voice, the absence of regret, the certainty that she was right. I saw myself face to face with a person I didn't recognize, and who, even so, was my daughter. Part of me screamed that I should understand, forgive, protect. But another part, more lucid, more wounded, knew that this was abuse, and that if I didn't react, it wouldn't be just my money that she would take. It would be my self-respect, my dignity, my identity. It wasn't about money. It was about respect. Since I discovered what Emma had done, a movie started playing in my head. I reviewed so many old situations that at the time seemed normal but now seemed like signs. Emma always knew how to convince me, how to turn things around. She used silence as a weapon, coldness as a response, and when she needed something, she came sweet, smiling, seductive. It was an invisible dance where I yielded and she led, and I called that love. There were times when, upon saying no, she would disappear for days, and I ended up giving in just to see her again. Others when I paid bills in her name and she didn't even say thank you. I told myself it was normal, that it was her way. But it wasn't. It was manipulation. I was taught to believe that good mothers endure everything, but what I was enduring was abuse disguised as need. She never needed to ask twice. I always said yes. I was useful in every phase, when she wanted to change colleges, when she couldn't pay the rent, when she broke up with Bradley for the first time and came back days later. And I was there. Present. Ready, available. But now, looking at everything with today's eyes, I see it wasn't presence. It was submission. I was being used, not loved. I was being kept close not out of affection, but out of convenience. And I accepted it, because I thought that was what mothers did. I was always useful. Never loved. I told everything to Susan, my sister. We sat on the porch with 2 mugs of hot tea, and I began to vent. Susan listened to me carefully, her eyes watering. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "Deborah, do you remember that time Emma told me to shut up in front of everyone? She was 18. I remembered. I had tried to minimize it, said she was nervous. Susan never forgot. She said that since she was young, Emma already showed signs of contempt for rules. She knew she could cross boundaries and that you would protect her," Susan continued. And in that moment I saw myself as the mother who was always ready to justify everything. It was easier to think it was a phase, an isolated attitude, than to face reality. I remembered so many similar scenes. Emma being rude to cousins, arrogant with colleagues, and me always intervening in her favor. I thought I was protecting my daughter, but perhaps I was protecting her behavior. Susan looked at me with affection but firmness. "She tested you for years, and never found resistance. That hurt. But it hurt because it was true. Perhaps in the name of peace, I taught Emma that my pain was acceptable, as long as she was satisfied. Perhaps I allowed the birth of this version of her that now betrays me. Susan held my hand. You are not guilty for this. But you are not innocent either. The silence between us said more than any word. Perhaps I let her learn that she could walk all over me. That night I decided to review the files from my old cell phone, stored on a flash drive kept for years. I found screenshots of conversations between Emma and a friend. In one of them the friend said, "But what if your mom notices?" And Emma replied, "Imagine that. She doesn't even miss the money." I read that 3 times. The words recorded there had a weight I couldn't explain. They were more than disrespect. They were cruelty. They were the confirmation of what I feared. In other messages she explained plans to buy clothes, pay for hotel reservations, and even transfer money to her own husband using my data. She trusts so much she doesn't even check anything, she said. I saw my name being used as a password for neglect, as if I weren't a person but an institution. Someone without limits, without will, without rights. A walking card, an inexhaustible reserve. Each screenshot was a new stab. And there was no doubt that this was intentional. In those messages, Emma referred to me as a safe source, cash cow, and even joked saying that if I knew I would cry but forgive later. I felt my body shake. Everything was there. The plans, the contempt, the certainty of impunity. And more than anything, the conviction that she had control. Emma wasn't a confused daughter. She was a woman who saw her own mother as something disposable, something useful, something manipulatable. I was a resource. I wasn't a reference. She didn't see me as a mother. She saw me as a source. After so much time, I decided to speak with Bradley. I needed answers. I needed to know if he was involved or if at least he knew something. I called, and his voice came dragged, suspicious. I told him about the charge, about the access to the email, and asked if he was aware of what was happening. He hesitated. He said he had no idea, that he only knew about the trip through Emma, that he thought it was all agreed with me. But his voice trembled. I asked for more details. When did he learn about the trip? Who bought the tickets? He stammered, switched dates, said Emma mentioned a gift. I started putting the pieces together. Bradley was lying. The evasiveness, the silences, the contradictions. He wasn't surprised. He didn't get indignant at what he heard. And more. He showed no type of empathy. It was as if he said, "You can handle it. You always handled it." And right there I understood. It wasn't just Emma. He was also part of it. He knew. He let it happen. I rummaged through my folders and among old files, I found a saved WhatsApp conversation of Emma with her own father. It was from 2 weeks before the purchase of the tickets. She said, "I think she won't even notice." And he replied, "She will pay. She always pays." I read that with my heart racing. It was a conspiracy. A mutual certainty that I would pay the bill, literally and emotionally. And worse, that I would accept it quietly. As I always did. They knew. They counted on it. I felt as if my entire history with Bradley was summed up in that sentence. A life in which he saw me as someone useful, not as someone valuable. Emma inherited from him the contempt camouflaged as kindness. A type of connivance that hurts more than a scream. The confirmation of that message sealed everything. I was the joke. The woman who funds everything. The ex-wife who doesn't complain. The mother who is content with crumbs. And they knew. They laughed behind my back. It was agreed upon. And I was the joke. I cried. A dense, ancient, suffocated cry. A cry of disappointments I didn't want to see, of memories I minimized, of alerts I ignored. I cried not only for Emma or for Bradley but for me. For the woman I kept silencing day after day in the name of peace. For the Deborah who said it's okay, while bleeding inside. For the mother who believed that love was enough, that presence healed, that silence protected. But now I knew. Silence also destroys. I dried my tears and in front of the mirror, I faced myself for real. I said in a firm voice, "This will not happen again." For the first time it wasn't a vent. It was a decision. I couldn't go back in time but I could decide where this story would end. And it wouldn't be with humiliation. I would no longer be an accomplice to my own pain. That needed to stop. Not for revenge, but for self-respect. The Deborah who survived was giving way to the one who would choose, from then on, to live. It was time to protect the woman I am. No longer the blind mother. Gregory's office was silent. Only the sound of the clock hanging on the wall filled the spaces. He leafed through my papers, observing every line with attention. When he finally raised his eyes, there was no hesitation. Deborah, this is a crime. You have proof, you have history, you have the data. There is no ambiguity. I swallowed hard. I wanted him to say something else. A softer way out. But what I heard was direct and incontestable. She is your daughter. But it is also fraud. I sat there with my fingers intertwined, trying to find arguments to delay, justify, soften. But he just looked at me serene and firm. It is not an emotional issue. It is legal. And you need to protect yourself. That hit me deep. Until then, I only thought about protecting Emma. Even after everything, my maternal instinct screamed. Gregory didn't pressure me. He only showed that on this path there was no middle ground. It was the law or silence. And silence had already hurt me too much. I called Tiffany. She listened to everything as always. When I finished, what she said took me apart. You would report anyone else. Why is Emma an exception? I stayed mute. It was true. If it were a coworker, a neighbor, I would have already taken measures. But because she was my daughter, I hesitated. Tiffany didn't say it with coldness, but with love. Love from someone who knows that protecting can also mean confronting. Love is not impunity, Deborah, she completed. Love is not impunity. The next morning, I took a deep breath, got dressed as if for an important meeting, and went to the police station. I handed over all the documents, explained everything with a firm voice, even though inside I was crumbling. The agent took notes while I narrated, and with every word it was as if I buried a part of the mother I always wanted to be. When I finished the report, I signed with trembling hands. I left the police station in silence, leaned against the car and cried. But it was a different cry. Painful, yes, but also liberating. Now justice had a name, and it was mine. I spent the weekend preparing everything. I organized the evidence in order with dates, amounts, screenshots. I printed copies, highlighted the most important excerpts. I scheduled the meeting at the most neutral aunt's house, to avoid anyone thinking I wanted to control the environment. My goal was only one, to tell the truth. And I needed everyone to be there, listening, seeing, understanding. I arrived early, organized the table, adjusted the chairs. I was about to expose my pain, and I couldn't afford to fail. When the first family members arrived, I felt like I was in a courtroom. Some came with suspicious expressions, others with looks of solidarity. I wished everyone good afternoon and asked for patience. I started the presentation calmly, showing the chronology of facts. From the first access to my email, passing through the small purchases to the airline tickets. I spoke of how I tried to resolve it in silence. But everything had a limit. As the data appeared, the looks became more serious, more attentive, more shocked. I showed prints of the messages between Emma and Bradley, the improper expenses, the login records. There was a clear, indisputable line. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a meticulously executed theft. When I finished, the silence was absolute. No one said anything. They just looked at each other. The image of the exemplary daughter, of the spontaneous young woman, began to crumble. It was painful but necessary. For the first time, I felt that my voice wasn't alone, that my pain was real for the others too. The looks changed. No one could deny it. Suddenly, the door opened with a snap. Emma appeared, dressed casually, hair tied back, cell phone in hand. She entered as if she owned the scene. She looked around, analyzing the environment. When she realized everyone was staring at her, she blurted out with contempt. All this because I didn't want to pay for a tour? The audacity was unbelievable. The poison of the sentence hung in the air. Some family members looked away. Others stared at her with perplexity. But she seemed to like the tension, as if she still controlled everything. My pulse accelerated. For a second, I almost went back to the old Deborah, the one who lowers her head. But no. I stood up, took the dossier, and opened it to the page with the password changes. I pointed to the recovery email, the login times. I said in a clear voice, You didn't just invade my accounts. You took ownership of me. Emma rolled her eyes, trying to laugh, but no one joined in. For the first time, her strategy failed. She was no longer the owner of the narrative. She still mocked my pain. Without waiting for an answer, I continued. I showed the password exchange, the new email configuration, the connected devices. I pointed out every piece of data, every line, every access. You used my trust and thought you would never be confronted. For the first time, I saw hesitation on her face. She didn't retort. She didn't scream. She just swallowed hard. The family members' eyes turned to her. Some with sadness, others with indignation. But no one smiled. No one defended her. And in that instant, something finally broke. The silence in the room was the first real victory I had. That afternoon, Susan called me. Her voice was choked up. She said she needed to tell me something she had been keeping for years. We went to a discreet cafe, and as soon as we sat down, she held my hand. Deborah, do you remember when my card was cloned about 4 years ago? I found out it was Emma. I froze. She explained that she didn't have complete proof, only suspicions and movements that coincided. But now, seeing everything I had revealed, she was sure. Susan said that at the time she didn't want to cause me embarrassment. She thought it would be something isolated, a slip-up. But she remembered how Emma always treated her with a certain superiority, as if she knew she would never be confronted. She had also noticed changes in her own statements, small purchases like snacks and clothes, followed by vague justifications from Emma. It became clear to both of us that this wasn't new. It wasn't a recent mistake. It was a pattern. The revelation destroyed me once again. If Emma did this to my sister, how many other people were on this list? I thought I was the center of the deception, but I realized I was just part of something bigger. Her manipulation extended for years, and the feeling of impunity strengthened over time. With every silence, she gained more space. With every excuse, she learned she could continue. And we, out of love or fear, let her. She started before. I was just another victim. I called Bradley that same night. But this time, I prepared my cell phone to record the conversation. I wanted evidence. When he answered, I went straight to the point. You knew Emma used family cards, didn't you? On the other side of the line, a long silence. And then he replied with a tired voice. I knew she exaggerated, but I thought it was just a phase. I felt my entire body freeze. He didn't just know, he normalized it. I insisted, asked if he had ever spoken to her about it. He changed the subject. Said Emma was an adult, that she had her own problems, that he just wanted to help in his own way. But help how? Covering up mistakes? Silencing? I realized finally that he was also part of the problem. His omission was convenience. It was easier to let me bear everything than to position himself as a father. That wasn't ignorance. It was a choice. I forwarded the recording to Gregory. I needed him to know everything. In less than 24 hours, he called me with a new proposal to initiate a preventive protection process. He blocked my social security number for new financing in the name of third parties, limited bank access, and asked me to change passwords and review all digital data. This is not an emotional war, Deborah. It is a matter of personal security. His words echoed as a warning, and for the first time I understood that what was at stake went beyond me. It was about anyone who crossed her path without noticing. It was about my nieces, my elderly uncles, even coworkers. Emma was smart, articulate, and knew where to find loopholes. If I did nothing, other victims would emerge. And the cycle would continue. But no more. I would no longer allow myself to be the bridge between her and other people's loss. It wasn't just about me. It was about all the next targets. I arrived at work that morning like any other. I greeted the receptionist, organized my desk, opened my email. At 10 a.m. I saw her shadow on the glass. Emma. Arms crossed, firm eyes. Before I said anything, she spoke. Congratulations. You managed to destroy your own daughter. And the whole family along with it. I had no reaction. The office stopped for a few seconds. My heart was racing, but my expression didn't yield. She raised her voice, accusing me of exposure, humiliation, of having ruined everything because of a few dollars. It was surreal. She still reversed the roles, placing herself as the victim, painting me as the villain. I just listened. There was no room for dialogue, only for drama. I saw colleagues moving away discreetly, some watching from afar. And me there, feeling the ground disappear beneath my feet. Not from fear but from sadness. How could she still not see? She still reversed the roles. Hours later, Miles called me. He asked to talk in person. We met at a cafe near work. He arrived with his head down, looking nervous. "Deborah, I need to apologize to you." I was surprised. He told me that for months he suspected Emma's behaviors, the lies, the spending. He said that many times he saw different cards in the names of relatives, and that she always had a ready excuse. But now, seeing everything that happened, he could no longer close his eyes. He said he would step away for a while, that he needed to understand what was actually love and what was control. "You were always fair to me. I should have trusted sooner." His words moved me. Not because I expected redemption, but because someone inside her bubble was starting to see. Miles wasn't the problem, but he was part of the machinery. And when someone on the inside starts to doubt, the structure starts to crumble. And perhaps there was the beginning of change. Someone on the inside was starting to see the truth. Upon returning to work the next day, I was called by management. I thought criticism or embarrassment due to the previous day's scandal would come. But when I entered the room, I was received with empathy. The HR manager offered me water, said they had understood everything, that my stance was admirable. "We are with you, Deborah. And if you need time, support, anything, we are at your disposal." I stood paralyzed for a few seconds. I didn't expect acceptance. I had prepared for the worst. To be seen as fragile, problematic, a target of gossip. But I received exactly the opposite. There I realized that what Emma took from me wasn't everything. True ties still existed. Respect. Support. Recognition. I left that room with my eyes watering, but not from sadness, from gratitude. Maybe I had lost a daughter, but I gained myself back. And people who saw who I was beyond the pain. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. I arrived earlier at that new family meeting. The table was set, the documents organized, and my breathing, although irregular, was determined. Gradually, my brothers, uncles, and cousins settled in silence, as if sensing the weight of what was to come. Emma arrived last. She entered with an air of a victim, shoulders slumped, a rehearsed look of disappointment. She sat down without greeting anyone, and as soon as she noticed the atmosphere, she took the floor. "I just wanted to help, bring the family together, do something beautiful," she said with her voice slightly choked. But everything turned against me. She used every word as a disguise, trying to prop up her image on the ties she manipulated for so long. She repeated phrases we already knew. "You don't understand how hard it is to be me. I did everything for love. I just wanted us to be together." But with every attempt at justification, the silence in the room grew. I observed. I let her say everything. And then I realized. It wasn't what she said. It was how everyone was listening. Before, any dramatic gesture from Emma created doubts, cracks. This time it created discomfort. There was no more room for acting. The weight of the truth was in the air, immutable, silent. No one interrupted her. No one defended her. No one nodded in solidarity. It was her old script. But something was different. I stood up slowly but with conviction. I felt every gaze turn to me, but I didn't hesitate. I am no longer anyone's bank. The words came out naturally, as if they had lived in me for ages. I turned to Emma and continued. "You didn't destroy me. You just woke me up." She tried to laugh, to huff, but her expression wavered. For the first time, it was I who commanded the scene. And not with anger, with clarity. With presence. I took a deep breath and went deeper. "I am not here to beg for love. I am here to demand respect." I saw the tension take over her shoulders. She moved restlessly, as if control were slipping through her hands. I continued speaking with serenity. "I kept quiet for years. And that gave you power. But the silence is over. And with it, the abuse." Every word was a liberation. Not just mine, everyone's who was there. Emma bit her lips, her eyes watering not from regret, but from fury. She didn't expect this. She didn't count on me having courage. Even less that the others would watch silently. What infuriated her most was having no reaction. No weapon worked. No trick had an effect. She was finally surrounded by truths, by a mother who had finally chosen herself. I no longer expect your love. I only demand respect. What came next was an explosion. She stood up, knocking over the chair with a crash. She screamed, pointed her finger at me, called everyone cowards, said that no one there deserved her presence. Her eyes were red, her fists clenched. She tried to threaten to leave, then hesitated. But no one reacted. No one tried to stop her. The house, silent, was the echo of her emptiness. She walked to the door, still waiting for some reaction. A call, a plea, a gesture of reconciliation. But nothing came. Bradley remained seated. Miles lowered his head. The cousins looked away. And I just remained standing. In silence. For the first time she understood. Her screams no longer controlled anyone. And then she opened the door, left and closed it with force. For the first time she left alone. Time passed like a slow but constant wave. The lawsuit against Emma followed its course. Now without my emotional blockage. I handed over everything I had, collaborated with the legal procedures and remained firm. The bank canceled my old card and issued a new one, with reinforced protocols. Emma's name was officially blacklisted. The woman who once had unrestricted access to my world, now couldn't even open a simple account. In that scenario of irreversible changes, something in me also transformed. There was no more room for guilt, nor for denial. I no longer tried to understand her reasons. That didn't matter anymore. What mattered was protecting who I had become. Emma was no longer a threat. She was a consequence. A woman facing her own acts. Alone. And the world finally treated her like an adult. She lost her credit. Literally and emotionally. A week later I received the news that for a long time I imagined would be impossible. Emma and Bradley's house had gone to auction. Not because of me but because of debts accumulated over the last few months. Denied loans, unpaid installments, unfulfilled promises. The home that once represented comfort became a foreclosure. And with that, the stability she pretended to control collapsed. Bradley tried to contact the family asking for help, but no one answered. The irony of it all made me reflect. I had warned, shown the risks, begged for boundaries. And I was ignored. Today, they were the ones surrounded by the weight of their own choices. And no one could save them because they never allowed themselves to be corrected. The fall was fast, silent, and definitive. The mask had fallen and the world reacted. Lies no longer paid bills. And the names that always served as a shield were now being charged. The consequences arrived. Without warning. That same week, while drinking coffee alone on the porch, I received a message on my cell phone. It was from Miles. Just one sentence. Thank you for opening my eyes. Nothing more. But it was enough to move me. I closed my eyes for an instant and took a deep breath. That wasn't an apology, nor a reconciliation. It was an admission, a recognition, and above all a sign that something had changed. Knowing that someone saw, that someone woke up, gave me a spark of hope. Not in Emma, that part one had buried, but in me, in my value, in the impact of my courage. That sentence from Miles was small, but it carried the weight of a choice, the choice to no longer be part of the cycle. And in this new cycle I was also someone else. Stronger, more whole, more mine. It was the end of a cycle, and the beginning of another. Months later I found a new purpose. I started a support group for parents who, like me, suffered financial abuse by their own children. In the beginning there were just 3 of us. But a few meetings were enough for the reports to multiply. The shared pain was devastating, but also healing. Every story reminded me of mine. And, at the same time, showed me how possible it was to turn wounds into strength. I discovered that silence was the greatest accomplice of these abuses. Many parents felt shame, fear of judgment, guilt for not having raised them better. I felt all of that. But now I felt something else, courage. In the group we created a space without guilt, without pointed fingers. Only truth. And gradually we broke the taboo. What once destroyed me now served as a bridge. For me. For them. For so many others who just needed to be heard. The pain that destroyed me became a bridge for others. Tiffany visited me on a sunny Sunday. We drank tea in the backyard, recalling everything that had happened. She smiled and said, "Emma disappeared from social media. Maybe she is trying to find herself again. Who knows, maybe one day she will understand. I listened in silence, looking at the sky. Yes, maybe. Maybe one day. But it wasn't something I expected anymore. The silent hope that kept me captive had been dissolved. I no longer awaited redemption. The pain of being forgotten by someone I birthed still existed, but it was different. It was no longer a prison, but a scar visible but closed. Tiffany held my hand, and I reciprocated lightly. "You are not bad for having protected yourself, Deborah," she said. And I knew in that instant that I wasn't. The guilt that dressed me for years had been exchanged for something more worthy. Dignity. I chose to live. And I wouldn't wait for anyone else for that. But I won't wait. I walked to the beach that afternoon. The sun was setting delicately, dyeing the sky orange and gold. I sat on the sand, took off my shoes, and let the water touch my feet. I looked at the horizon for long minutes, and everything I lived passed like a movie. The humiliations, the lies, the confrontations, the silences, the silent victories. For the first time, everything seemed to have its place. And principally its end. I spoke to myself in a low voice as if making a pact. I exist beyond the role of mother. Because yes, I was a mother. With everything that role carries. But I am also a woman. I am Deborah. No longer an extension of the daughter I raised. Nor the shadow of the ex-husband I silenced. I am mine. Whole. Present. And free. A freedom that cost me everything but which today is worth more than any past. And now finally I am just Deborah. Now I am curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever gone through something similar? Support the channel, subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. I am leaving on the final screen another story that you will also like, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.